G'day, friends and fans. Welcome to Writing Quarter 38, World Building Part 6, The Economy. Before I begin, I'd like to remind you that this channel is sponsored by you, the viewing audience. I need your support to help raise awareness, to fund, and to pretty much make a living. Without your support, I have virtually no income. Okay, I'm not employed. I'm not employable. I rely on your help. So please help a brother out. Do something for your fellow man. Even if it's just a few dollars a month to my Patreon. Now, of course, I am trying to build a living as a writer. And that, of course, relies on you buying my books and supporting my writing through Patreon. But I understand not all of you can. So please don't take it as a personal attack. That said, please check out the links after the description. My book links are found in my link tree. And of course, so I have Patreon, PayPal to make donations, Ko-Fi, and I have a merch shop. I'm not asking you to give me money for nothing. I'm actually willing to sell you products and help raise awareness. And when I'm finished, I will be releasing the book on the guide to world building on Amazon and other digital platforms. Now, economics. Now, the first part of the economy is the economic system. Is it a market, a feudalist system, or socialism? There's pretty much only one. There's only three models. You have a market economy. Private companies own and operate the means of production. Feudalism, a class structure where the people own and operate, but a system of nobility own the land and reap most of the benefits through taxation. So the merchant class are not rich and pretty much confined to single ownership, like owner operator of a ship, owner operator of a farm, or owner operator of a store or factory. It's a very tight fascistic style of government, but it is not as bad as socialism. And in fact, in some respects, the workers are more free because there's no monopoly. There's only a few monopolistic overlords who rely on popularism to stay in power. Whereas socialism is an attempt, so to speak, whereby organized labor owns and controls everything and systematically tears the world apart as they indulge in their fascist, communist, or whatever dictator. It's a system of failure. You cannot have a worker who wants more money and a worker who wants cheaper goods trying to balance the economy because they're going to serve their selfish interests. That's the three. You either have the people who freely own, you have a government own or control it, socialism, or you have a in between, which is feudalism. Feudalism is actually an in between system. It's not actually a free market, but it is halfway there, and it's not entirely a socialist government because the people have far more freedoms than socialism. Like, for a start, under feudalism, the militia is owned and controlled by the people, though they do answer to a lord, and most of the lords use professional knights in order to stay in power. But still, it is a much freer system than socialism. Socialism will have you believe it goes feudalism, market economy, socialism. No, it actually starts as socialism or tribalism, transitions to feudalism, and then transitions to a market economy. And of course, market economies do slip back into feudalism time to time. And of course, we're now slipping from a feudalistic system back into a socialist system with the US government controlling the economy via a central bank. Now, of course, if you're into economics, you'll understand you do not have to have a central bank, and how regulated is the business depends on whether it's a free market, feudalist, or socialist. All systems are brands. There's only 3 types. Now, part 6.2 is trade and commerce. Now, trade is facilitated a number of ways. Do you have traveling merchants, guilds, stores, auction houses, etc.? A lot of places throughout history have always had auction houses. There've always been merchant classes, but in some cities and countries and regions, trade and commerce between neighbors led to alliances, trade partnerships, became actually mergers like the Austrian-Hungarian Empire or the British Empire. The first British Empire came about through trade. Now, of course, soft power. Trade is soft power. How much soft power is, how much involvement in trade is government. And actually, the less involved government is in trade, the freer trade is, the less trouble in the world. And of course, if you're writing stories, you want more, not less. Currency. Types of currencies, regional currencies, how's it valuated, goes into economics, whether you have standard, like for if there's 10 tons of gold, the average gold coin being 3 ounces, not 1 ounce, as you're often led to believe, but often a coin will only contain 1 ounce of gold, a slight amount of silver, a slight amount of uranium oxide and zinc and copper. So you have this heavy, malleable gold coin, and of course, being slightly radioactive, it's easier to trace. But in ancient times, the uranium was actually used as a pigment, not actually as a method of tracing. Uranium oxide was used as a pigment to hide the other elements in the gold, because the gold wouldn't transfer its. There wasn't enough gold. Remember, it's only an ounce. It's only 1/3 gold, so you needed a surface pigment to, and that's why a lot of gold coins don't look like gold coins, because we're often led to believe that bright, shining yellow objects are gold, not dull. So, how is the country circulated? Well, let's take a market economy. Government would buy goods using its minted coins from merchants, and then the merchants would pay their workers with the minted coins, and the workers would buy products and pay their taxes with minted coins. And this would circulate the economy. What happens if the taxes are too high? Circulation dries up, government has too much money, they release it back to the economy as stimulus. Unfortunately, we have too much corruption these days, but I'm just talking about a basic economy here. So, basic economics. It's a pyramid. The government, every year, there's so many coins minted. How are they evaluated depends on the production of gold, which is why they further and further develop. This is why we went off the gold standards, because the cost of gold was increasing rapidly as demand for gold rose for non-currency purposes. So the currency was hypervaluated, and instead of minting lots of currency to devalue it, they replaced the currency altogether with a debt-based currency, where they would just print money and say, right, if we print $1 billion, society owes us $1 billion, and we tax them at an interest rate, which basically means so that interest rate pretty much sets, right, if we tax the people at 30%, 16% of that will go to the Reserve Bank, and there's the interest rate adjusts by plus or minus points. So much of that money will flow back to us. So the government has a vested interest to keep interest low, inflation low, etc., because that means they have more money. But investors buy debt and therefore want high interest, because that means they collect, not the state collects that debt, or the Reserve Bank collects that debt. And that's how reserve banks have increased in power and wealth, through debt. Now, alternatives to gold are silver, palladium, uranium, beryllium, diamonds, zirconia has actually been used as a secondary currency. So as diamonds, zirconia, of course, as a diamond replacement for drills, very cheap, but it's actually you got to understand there's two currency systems. One is the physical money, right? I buy something with a British pound, that's a pound of gold, allegedly, but it ain't no more. It's just that's why it's not. But pound sterling is silver, not gold, and it's backed by silver. That's why it has a different value, and it's a trade currency. US have silver dollars, greenbacks, treasury bills, and actually gold standard notes still. They are actually commodity notes, or they're actually not solely gold. This is the commodity market, debt certificates. So it's issued by merchant bankers, not actually by government. Now, not all currency, of course, is legitimate. You have cryptocurrencies, you have fiat currencies, you have private currencies. In fact, there are over 131 private currencies in existence at the moment that aren't Ethereum or any other crypto. There's gold credit. Lots of companies merchant banks issue certificates and bearer bonds those are actually bonds are a form of currency. If stocks, bonds, diamonds, and as I said, even zirconia, rubies, rare earth metals, or food has all been circulated as a means of payment. So that's what currency is, a means of payment. Now, of course, in more and more futuristic, it's always been predicted that there would be that the system would eventually move to a pure debt system known as the credit. Now, I forget who stated it, but basically, the credit is the merger of stocks, bonds, everything. Basically, everything is owned, bought, or traded on credits. And the credit system basically automatically, it's exactly a universal currency and a universal payment system, whereby everybody's automatically paid. The more you work, the more you earn, the more you trade, the more you and you would have accumulated credits whereby you would be you'd accumulate credits from different sources, and basically, like, it's what you're owed. And depending on, so if you're owed by the company credits, you could take the company's goods. You could take, if you had enough, you could actually take over the company's assets. But that would be those credits would put you on a different list. But each credit, it's like basically like a cryptocurrency where it's a system of debt, and it can be transferred to others. So if the company owes you credits, you exchange it in the bank for food credits, or you have vending machines which would give you soy bars, or water bottles, or condoms and panties, and ammunition for your gun. These are actual concepts that have been widely circulated in science fiction for a long time now. The problem is, no matter how many times people find a flaw in universal currency and universal credits, people still insist on it because it's writing is about a system of conflicts, and conflicts are currency and favors in opposition, where you have two people wanting the same thing, they're going to fight over it. Full stop. Right? You have gang X, gang Y, both wanting to control the flow of drugs, and people with little to no social credit would trade their whatever credits they had, or pretty much trade their bodies in the sex trade for drugs, because there would be no credit, whereas the ultra rich would pay in physical goods such as guns, ammunition, and favors, because the powerful corporations would control the police, control everything because of the credit system. The credit system pretty much favors those who generate the credit, the most credit. And of course, companies generate the most credit, so they can afford to trade goods they produce back for their own shares. And of course, most corporations would, if there's a universal currency, the most universal currency of them all is the bullet. Think about it. Take some time to set in, but yes, in a cyberpunk style setting, bullets are currency. They're how you obtain goods and services, sex, drugs, food, etc. Favors and power all come from who gets you to point your gun where. And of course, you have to remember that if you take out a corpo, the other corpos are just going to go, no, bro, we're in competition, but we're a club and a big club, and you're not in it. So you hurt us. We all hurt you. Now, currency, in order to be circulating denominations, it's pretty much universal now that there's 1, 2, 5, 10. Those are the denominations, and those are the base denominations, and then of course you go even, and then you go from that. Quarters, and quarters, and 50-cent pieces. They're, well, tens. 1 becomes 10, 2 becomes 20. Why would you have quarters? Well, that's a novel currency, by the way. But yeah, pretty much universal. Most people only have 1, 2, 5, and 10. So 1 becomes 10, 2 becomes 20, your 5 becomes 50, your 10 becomes 100, and that 100 is $1. So that's now 1, and then you have 2, 5, and then so forth. And it's the same in the credit system. The credit system, however, runs on a $1.99, or basically the price of 1 9mm bullet. Yeah, could you imagine that? But that's that's universal currency. They don't have denominations in universal currency. It's a completely digital fractional transactional system that usually employs multiples that of currency like 199, 299, 599, 1499, 24.99, 49.99, and then 99, 999, all the way up to 999. So there's fractions all the way every time. If somebody says they're going to give you $10,000, that's just like 10 large. That's like an exception, but the norm is like you buy a drink, it's $4.99. If you buy a soy bar, it's $1.49. It's always a fractional transaction unless you're talking about big numbers. Once you go over 999, that's when it becomes just strict. That's just too big. Round everything off. But that's different currencies. Now, currencies, of course, don't have to be minted coins. They can be printed notes. Notes have security. That one of the things is not only how is currency broken down into units such as dollars, cents, dimes, quarters, or credits. With digital currencies, you of course you don't actually know its value until it's decrypted. So you'll need a system behind currency. You need a system, and how is that system secured? And of course, how does the economic trade occur? Well, every region, every city has to have. See, here's the thing: regions produce food, water, or fuel, wood, timber, resources. Cities produce factories. That's all. Although they do have services, but most services are not, trade. Usually the facilitation of trade or the facilitation of the transactions of currency. Or if your economy has slavery, of course, cities are where slaves are bought and sold. But of course, modern slavery is robotics, androids, or the mass migration of labor. It's still slavery. You just don't call it slavery. Now, this might have evolved throughout history, but every city used to have a unique set of factories. Every region used to have a unique set of foods, mines, and others. And of course, nationally, you have communication services, fuel services, and of course, energy services and lubrications. Of course, once upon a time, it just used to be lamp oil. Specialization of trade. You have cities that actually specialize in weaponry. You may or may not know this, but a lot of small regional towns in the United States, for instance, their largest employer are weapons factories. But they don't call themselves weapons factories. You have paint factories, which do produce paint, but their biggest customer is the US military. And you have steelworks who produce, and chemical factories who produce. And their biggest customer is, of course, the arms industry. And of course, the arms industry is all nebulous. So you never actually know which plants are where at any one time, who's producing ammunition. It's always you're a cog in a chain. The end chain is somewhere down the line. You just Albuquerque or someplace out of the way where there's a low non-transient population, and people who try to pull off the highway just never seem to find the exit ramp. They see the bridges go over, but they say, where's that road come from? And yes, did you know there are actually a third of the roads in the United States? They're not connected to the major arteries. artilleries because they're part of the huge artillery chain in the United States. Still there today, set up during World War II to mass produce and move about goods and services for the military for production of artillery shells and feed it into ports in LA and New York and Louisiana. But of course, another thing is the livestock trade. So weapons and livestock, they're the biggest. Now, of course, natural resources, you have coal, timber. The more advanced you get, you'll have uranium, beryllium, silicon, palladium, gold, silver. You'll always have some sort of iron up until about late stage super materials. These are plastics, although their base material is still steel, but it's mostly magnesium, manganese, tungsten. Those are as you get into super materials, you start moving away from iron, carbon, and zinc and tin. But of course, eventually you get with super materials, you have to look at things like replicators and their implication and replacement of natural resources and recycling, whereby you have artificial timber, cellulose products grown in vats, or initially actually modern ready. You have leaves and twigs and even powder from chipboard manufacturers and factories and of course timber mills all turned back into chipboard, and more artificial timber and cellulose breakdown of even grass into wood and bamboo into wood. Now, of course, you have, again, I'm talking about super materials. You start to appear I think it's called Wormstone. You've got can't pronounce it, but it's basically you have material but you have materials now between 25, 50, 100, and even 170 times stronger than steel. You have an elastic aluminum, which is clear. You have these are super materials that exist today. You have carbon fiber, stronger than aluminum tungsten carbonate. You have superplastics, which are aluminum, magnesium, manganese, and other materials, including tungsten, which are basically like knotted ropes, but they're like super plastic. They're plastic and elastic, and they can be molded and melded into all sorts of products. But yeah, they're not conventionally made, and eventually they'll be made by replicators and robotics, because human hands aren't strong enough to, and even human operated machines are not fast enough to flex, bend, twist, and rearrange atoms. And it's like some of the processes, I mean, of course, in science fiction and in fantasy, you'll have magic. In science fiction, you'll have robotics and replicators. But natural resources are always going to be somewhere in your supply chain, whether it's the recycling of, the protection of, you know, in large scale systems, you'll have ore mining done in space, mostly for water, fuels. Deuterium will be produced artificially by exposure to radiation fields in stars, because it's the only way to mass produce high grade, high energy fuel. Although antimatter is another possibility, again, that will be produced in the atmospheres of stars. Yes, stars have atmospheres, by the way. And those auras can be 3-4 times up to the diameter of the star. So that's how these spaceships cook. They actually enter a very thin but superheated atmosphere. Yeah, Mercury is actually inside the soupy sea around the sun. That's how it's cooked and slow baked. And Venus is on the edge of that. That's why it's cooked and slow baked. That's why we're safe, because we're outside of that zone. Well, we're sort of in it, but we're not. We're on the edge where there's enough heat transfers to warm us, not cook us. Now, transportation systems. Now, of course, this will start with the wheel. Okay, horse, wheel, or hover, which hover will either be downward thrust produced by jet or wind or electromagnetic energy that produces what's called anti-gravity, although its proper term is contragravity. And contragravity forces can either be generated by the excitement of gravitons, a real they are actually a real exotic particle that has been proven to exist. It's just that the production thereof is so expensive, and you need lots of them to produce even the slightest amount of what's called repulsion. Now, propulsion energy is just one of many uh, theoretical physics projects that are real. You have rotational energy, which can replace the wheel with an actual electromagnetic force which rotates. And thus you'll have a bar that rotates on its own because the electricity passed through it. The exotic particles in there twisted like a. So as the electricity twists through the bar twists. It's like, wow, amazing stuff. So you have foot, horse, wheel, right? Those are what you would call primary transport. Then secondary transport would be cars and trucks, stuff that's fueled by liquid, such as liquid hydrocarbons, although liquid hydrogen or ammonia or water. And of course, anti-gravity, which would be something like a ZPM, which is now ZPM is a battery, sort of. It's actually a mechanical battery, although you don't see the mechanics. Now, ZPM take many forms, but the most common form is an electromagnetic bottle. Now, the bottle is a U, and the particle is actually moving up and down inside like a pendulum around the magnetic force in the middle. It doesn't go all the way, but it's this movement it's this movement in the bottle, that this pendulum energy, which because they drop the atom in, and because it's in a suspended in a magnetic field in a vacuum, the energy of the atom will 1.763 trillion times or something, it will vibrate. And that vibration produces, as you guessed it, E, 1 point something something volts. And you need a lot of them, but of course they're so tiny, and a stack of them will actually produce a lot of potential energy. So what you do is you take a ZPM, right, and you put 1,000 hours of 1,000 amp hours through it, for, as you guessed it, 1,000 hours. Now you have now that little slow moving atom is hyper excited. You now have 1,000 amp hours in that plus the potential energy. So you have a lot of energy in that ZPM crate. Now these are theoretical batteries. There are many designs to these bottles, spirals and U's for pendulums, spinning wheels, and all sorts of different attempts. They are somewhat functional. Different Now, of course, there's also deuterium batteries that take exotic matter, that is deuterium, a exotic form of hydrogen, um, and use somewhat uh, like plasma, and they turn it into plasma and basically use the heat to contain a plasma to contain electricity. And over time, the potential voltage is generated by the heat in the battery, heat cell battery. The problem is that they have a limited life and they often can't be refilled. There's radioactive decay and many other forms. So in transportation, energy, etc. How also along with transportation, so you have transportation of goods, transportation of currency, transportation of people, transportation of goods and services, transportation of information, ink, paper, owl, newspapers, electronic messages, radio. And eventually, our entire internet will be radio because it has been shown time and time again that 99.99% of information is we send out a tiny request and it comes back to us. But the problem is our infrastructure for communications is eating up so much energy. So what do? They have to break it or break the internet. And that massive amount of information will be broadcast to update servers on a constant basis, and we will be just plugged into a wireless network through in our building to the backbone, which will send out requests. And our frequently used pages will be in our roofs. We'll have a flat computer. The computer will be built through the house. It'll be a flat sheet etched. It'll store all the data, like all the data. It'll store not terabytes, but picobytes. The entire Encyclopedia Britannica per square inch. It'll store you'll have the internet in the roof of your house. And every day, all the transactions that go on that you need to update your internet will be updated by a radio network service because it is just getting too expensive and too destructive that if a cable breaks, they have to rip up roads and disrupt the entire system just to replace an inch of cable. It's just getting too expensive, bro. But business. Now, all goods have perceived value. A dollar loaf is perceived as good value, but a dollar meal is not. You perceive meal to be about it used to be $5, although $10. It depends on the value of your world currency, income, variety of food. But businesses, right? What are the crafts and trades that are highly valued? Now, of course, in a magic world, magic crafters, combat skills, entertainers will these, but specific crafts and trades, electricians. If you have something like ZPMs, you're going to need physicists to understand and build these things. They're highly complex. If you have replicators, the same thing. Some professionals are considered more elite than others, like magic. You're going to have guilds, witches, warlocks. You're going to have, of course, traditionally, witches would actually be sexually attracted to and often find themselves submitting themselves to warlocks just by their it's a strange and bizarre system, but warlocks is a type of witch that is particularly male that can break oaths, and they were originally called oath breakers. Now, I don't know what happened, whether or not this was a social thing or whatever, but so-called declared warlocks, probably psychopaths and women giving themselves to them, but we don't know exactly how this system worked or came out to be, but it did. It was a thing that really happened. That declared warlocks, witch doctors, etc., would have women throwing themselves at them, and they were pretty much above the law. Uh, Now, of course, some professions over time became more elite. Shoemakers, uh, they, I think that peaked actually around the 1960s, where you actually had shoes going for $1 million with diamonds and rubies, and ruby slippers was the real thing, by the way. They were your leather court shoe with a 1 inch heel, and they actually had in the leather individual rubies inserted into the actual um, red lacquer, so that, and the red lacquer was made from crushed beetles. Yeah. Now, of course, you have electricians giving way to programmers and engineers. In the future, you'll actually be looking at technological magic, whereby you'd have technological devices using exotic matter to create energy fields, which would create both solid holograms, audible, and visual spectacular effects. These devices would most likely be phones linked to your brain, believe it or not. And yeah, there is actual society will advance to the point where it can create devices that create magic. Now, of course, normal work for the average person, what would be normal work? Well, normal work would be a cleaner, carpenter, there'll always be builders, uh, plumbers, uh, possibly more and more prostitution. Um, there'll be professional surrogates, women who allow themselves to be impregnated either physically or through through physical means or through implantation. There'll be various law enforcement, and they'll probably be at the higher end of income, with soldiers above that, and then of course you'll get to that's average worker. In some societies, there will be no farmers because food will be paste grown in vats, and food paste is actually a real thing. Um, though most of food paste today is a mixture of bugs, wheat, um, processed flavorings, salt, preservatives, and other preservatives and flavorings, mostly chemical, but eventually most paste will be will the bugs bugs is a short-term solution to a problem that doesn't exist, because we already have better technology, but a lot of businesses, they decide the economy, and if they want a bug economy, they want a bug economy because they want to make money. They want to turn their $1,000 bug farms into $1 billion bug farms and become ultra wealthy on fake currency. But really, food paste, food grown, fat grown food, that is actually real. There is fat grown meat, artificial meat, real artificial meat that was actually first vat grown burger was, I believe, successfully grown in 2014 from a clump of cow cells, and cell cloning technology has since produced artificial blood, artificial organs, tissue repair systems where they can inject, take your tissue, produce and mass produce the necessary repair cells and inject them back into your bloodstream. Now, of course, all these technologies are not sound very futuristic, but they are well above the average person and well above even the elites today don't have access to all that. Some of this stuff still's in the lab. Some of it is just barely functional, where rules, regulations, and prohibitive costs pretty much background meat. Who wants a $20? Who wants a $20 beef patty? At a $30 but since the problem then it comes to value of work. Even at $30, the average worker is pricing themselves out of the market. I think 15's too high. I think the average person is that deflation is needed to restore the balance where people can feel that a $5.99 meal is acceptable. It is a basic meal with a basic beef patty, 3 veg, a chunk of cheese, and a bun with a bit of march, or actually butter if you should be. But these are functional technologies that can exist. Your six tray with your 6 basic meal items and protein, supplemental protein and fat. That's why we drink milk in the first place. So what if other animals don't drink milk? Actually, aphids do. Ants milk aphids. Aphids produce you have just, well, so what? Well, polar bears eat fish. That means we all got to eat fish. See, stop basing your actions on other things just because other animals don't drink milk. So what, bro? So what? Stop letting individuals dictate and narrow your options. I'm broadening your options in world building. You create worlds that are amazing with some of the there's 3 searches: future tech, forbidden technology, and of course you can subscribe to my Patreon and read my science fiction RPG stuff where I go into technologies like this. And I actually can make some pretty good cases for different technologies now, but they would just grind you down. I'm just saying. When it comes to world building, I am building worlds. I am building a world, and we'll see what happens. But please like, share, subscribe, and all that fun stuff. Thank you for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you. To support the channel, links are in the description below, and see you all in the next video.